Does the world we see, the one we touch and measure, constitute the entirety of reality? Or is there something more, lurking just beyond the veil of perception? For centuries, maybe millennia, humanity has grappled with this question. We build towering monuments to logic, map the stars, unravel the very code of life, and yet, the whispers persist. Tales told in hushed tones around flickering fires, legends passed down through generations, speak of echoes, of presences, of those who linger after their time in the sun has ended. Ghosts. Spirits. The restless dead. Is it merely folklore, the fanciful imaginings of minds seeking patterns in chaos? Or does the relentless march of science, in its quest to illuminate every shadow, sometimes stumble upon truths that resonate with these ancient beliefs? Consider the energy that animates us. Physics tells us energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. So, what happens to our energy, the vital spark, when the body ceases its functions? Does it simply dissipate like heat from cooling embers? Or does it leave an imprint, a residual echo that, under certain conditions, might still interact with the world left behind? Some theories, hovering at the fringes of accepted science, explore concepts of consciousness fields, of quantum entanglement that might persist beyond physical death. Perhaps these are just modern attempts to rationalize an intuition as old as thought itself, that the end is not truly the end. Religions across the globe have enshrined this belief for thousands of years. Without the concept of an afterlife, of a soul's journey continuing, much of faith itself crumbles. It's a cornerstone belief, a deep-seated human need to find meaning beyond mortality. In the winding lanes and verdant landscapes of Vietnam, this belief isn't just abstract theology, it's woven into the very fabric of daily life. The spirit world, the realm of Ma, is often perceived not as distant heaven or hell, but as a parallel dimension, sometimes intersecting uncomfortably with our own. Ancestors are venerated, their presence felt, their guidance sought, their displeasure feared. Wandering souls, particularly those who met violent or unjust ends, are thought to roam the earth, capable of causing misfortune if not properly appeased. Offerings of food, incense, and joss paper are common sights, especially during times like Vu Lan, the Wandering Souls' Day, a period dedicated to placating these restless spirits. It's a world where omens are read in the flight of birds, where dreams carry messages from the departed, and where certain individuals are believed to possess a natural sensitivity, a bridge to this unseen realm. Such a soul was born under circumstances whispered about by the village midwife, something about the alignment of the moon and stars, a birth date that supposedly marked him for communion with the Yam, the world of shadow and spirit, and carried an unusual awareness from his earliest days. It wasn't something overt, not visions or voices in the traditional sense, at least not initially. It was more a feeling. A sensitivity to atmospheres, an ability to sense undercurrents of emotion or history clinging to places, an occasional, fleeting glimpse of movement at the edge of his vision where nothing physical existed. His mother, Mi Lin, nurtured this quiet sensitivity. She was a woman steeped in tradition, her faith in the spirit world absolute, unquestioning. She lit incense daily, consulted fortune tellers, and saw the hand of fate and unseen forces in every turn of life. She understood, or believed she understood, the quiet weight her son carried. His father, Ba Quan, was another matter entirely. A man forged in the crucible of war, practical, grounded, often cynical. He'd seen too much tangible horror to have much patience for spectral threats. Ghosts? Nonsense. The worries of superstitious women. He loved his wife, humored her beliefs to a point, but fundamentally saw the world through a lens of hard-won pragmatism. Build shelter, find work, provide for your family, these were the concerns of men. The whispers of the dead were distractions, illusions born of fear or ignorance. This fundamental difference created a quiet, persistent tension within their small home, a loving friction between unwavering faith and hardened skepticism. Life, however, has a way of challenging even the firmest convictions. Economic hardship, the relentless grind of poverty in their post-war homeland, pushed Ba Quan to seek opportunities elsewhere. Word had spread about Vong Shuyan province, a region once ravaged by conflict, now slowly opening up. Land was cheap, the government offered incentives for resettlement, and tales of fertile soil and new beginnings circulated. It was a gamble, moving to a place still bearing the visible and invisible scars of war, but Ba Quan saw it as a necessary one. Mi Lin, despite her apprehension about uprooting their lives, trusted her husband's judgment in worldly matters, though her prayers for protection grew longer, more fervent. And, still a young boy but old enough to sense the shift, felt a mixture of excitement and a nameless dread. Vong Shuyan province unfolded before them like a half-remembered dream, beautiful and broken. Lush, almost suffocating greenery pressed in from all sides, punctuated by the skeletal remains of bombed-out buildings and the regimented lines of rubber plantations stretching towards the horizon. The air hung thick and humid, heavy with the scent of damp earth, wood smoke, and something else, something old and sorrowful. They found lodging in a small, bustling town that seemed determined to outgrow its past, but the shadows lingered. People spoke of the war in oblique terms, memories handled like unexploded ordnance, best left undisturbed. And they spoke of the land. Ba Quan, ever practical, sought value. He found it, or so he thought, on the outskirts of town, a sizable plot offered at a price almost too good to be true. It bordered the crumbling walls of what had once been a military clinic or infirmary, now abandoned, its windows like vacant eyes staring out over the overgrown fields. Why so cheap? The whispers started almost immediately, finding their way to Mi Lin's receptive ears first, then, reluctantly, acknowledged by Ba Quan as too persistent to ignore. This wasn't just any land. This was that land. The place locals avoided after dark, the ground where, decades ago, during a forgotten, brutal skirmish near the infamous Dragon's Jaw garrison back in 72, soldiers from both sides had fallen in droves. There had been no time for proper burials, no neat rows of marked graves. Bodies, hastily collected by terrified villagers under the cover of darkness, were interred haphazardly, right there. On that very plot. Some said they were piled high, burned first with gasoline to mask the stench, then covered with earth. Nameless. Unremembered. Unsanctified. It's poisoned ground, Ba Quan, Mi Lin pleaded, her face pale, eyes wide with genuine fear. The air itself feels heavy with them. They haven't found peace. Building there, it's inviting misfortune. Think of an. Ba Quan scowled, running a hand over his weathered face. He'd heard the stories too, dismissed them initially. Battlefield burials weren't uncommon. Sad, yes, but hardly cause for spectral panic. Yet, the consistency of the tales, the genuine fear in the eyes of the locals who spoke of eerie lights and chilling sounds emanating from the plot at night, even Mi Lin's unwavering conviction, it began to erode his skepticism. He walked the land himself, pacing its uneven surface under the oppressive Vong Shuyan sun. It did feel strange. Quiet. Too quiet. As if the birdsong stopped at its borders, as if the very air held its breath. Was it just his imagination, fueled by his wife's fears? Or was there truly something watchful, something resentful, emanating from the soil beneath his feet? He remembered the clinic nearby, a place inherently linked with suffering and death even in its intended function. And the stories of that battle, a particularly nasty ambush, losses heavy on both sides. Ground consecrated by violence. Nonsense, he muttered, kicking at a clump of weeds. It's just land. Cheap land. We need this, Lin. Need it more than our peace. More than our son's safety. Mi Lin's voice trembled. There are energies, Quan. Forces we don't understand. My grandmother always said, you don't disturb those who died badly. You appease them, or you leave them be. Building a home, bringing life and laughter to a place of such sorrow, it's a provocation. Her word struck a chord, deeper than he cared to admit. He thought of his quiet, sensitive son. The midwife's words at his birth, dismissed for years, flickered uneasily in his memory. What if Lin was right? What if this cheap land came with a hidden, terrible cost? He pushed the thought away. He was a soldier, a survivor. He wouldn't be swayed by shadows and old wives' tales. They would build. They had to. But the doubt, once planted, began to fester. He found himself watching him more closely, startling at sudden noises at night, feeling a prickle of unease when the wind rustled the tall grass bordering the plot. Lin's nightly prayers, her hushed litanies for protection, seemed less like superstition and more like a necessary shield against an unseen but palpable threat. The pragmatist in him warred with a burgeoning, unwilling fear. He wouldn't abandon the plan, wouldn't yield to spectral anxieties. Yet, perhaps a precaution wouldn't hurt. A nod to his wife's beliefs, a small concession to the unsettling weight of the land itself. Just in case. The rain soaked the land slowly, persistently, much like Lin's quiet words dripped nightly into his ear, eroding his hardened certainty. Perhaps, just perhaps, confronting the shadows required more than bricks and mortar. Perhaps it required an expert in shadows themselves. Perhaps it required an expert in shadows themselves. Ba Quan, a man who had faced down enemy fire and survived horrors that defied description, finally conceded, not defeat, precisely, but an acknowledgement that some battles required weapons beyond his understanding. Lin's fear, stark and unwavering, coupled with the land's heavy, watchful silence and the persistent whispers from the nearby townspeople, wore down his defenses. Fine. He would indulge this spiritual necessity. For Lin's peace of mind. Maybe, just maybe, even for himself. Finding such an expert, however, wasn't a simple matter of consulting a directory. Men like the one Lin spoke of, practitioners of the old ways, keepers of knowledge that straddled the line between reverence and fear, didn't advertise. Their names were passed in hushed tones, often accompanied by warnings as much as recommendations. It took discreet inquiries, a journey to a neighboring district known for its ancient temples and lingering traditions, before they were directed to Master No. He arrived not with fanfare, but like a drift of smoke, unassuming yet fundamentally altering the atmosphere. Master No was small, wiry, his back slightly stooped as if carrying an invisible weight. His skin was the color of dark teakwood, weathered and creased, and his simple black tunic seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. He could have been any aging peasant farmer, except for his eyes. Deep-set, unervingly bright, they seemed to pierce through pretense, stripping away the mundane to see the underlying currents of energy and intent. Ba Quan, accustomed to assessing men quickly, found himself instantly uncomfortable under that gaze, unable to meet it directly for more than a fleeting second. There was no obvious heroic spirit, no scholarly air, just an unnerving stillness, a profound depth that hinted at knowledge best left undisturbed. Master No wasted no time on pleasantries. He walked the perimeter of the plot, his bare feet seeming to test the soil's temper. He'd pause, head tilted as if listening to something inaudible to Ba Quan and Lin, who followed at a respectful distance, and clinging tightly to his mother's hand. Master No occasionally bent down, crumbling dirt between his fingers, sniffing the air with a concentration that was almost animalistic. He lingered near the crumbling wall of the old infirmary, his eyes tracing lines in the air, mapping unseen flows. Finally, he stopped near the center of the plot, turning slowly to face them. "The earth here, it weeps," he stated simply, his voice surprisingly resonant for his small frame. "Too much blood. Too much sorrow left untended. The yin energy is thick, stagnant. Like a bruise on the land that never healed." He looked directly at Ba Quan. "You wish to build a life here?" Ba Quan swallowed, his usual gruffness momentarily failing him. "We bought the land. We need a home." Master No nodded slowly. "Need is a powerful force. But this ground has its own occupants, its own needs. They are resentful." He gestured vaguely. "To build, you must first make peace. Or, at least, establish boundaries they will respect. It requires a negotiation." The negotiation, as it turned out, was a ceremony far more elaborate and visceral than Ba Quan had anticipated. Master No directed the preparations with quiet authority. An altar was erected, facing a specific direction Master No determined by observing the sun and shadows. Offerings were laid out, not just fruit and incense, but raw meat, potent rice wine, and specific herbs Master No produced from a worn cloth bag. Then came the sacrifices. For healthy roosters, their feathers gleaming in the afternoon light, were brought forward. Master No selected a knife with a handle wrapped in dark, stained leather. With swift, economical movements that spoke of long practice, he slit each bird's throat, catching the bright, steaming blood in earthenware bowls. The life force, the young energy of the roosters, was needed to counter the land's pervasive een. He walked the perimeter again, carefully dribbling the blood in a precise pattern, chanting in a low, guttural language that Ba Quan didn't recognize, ancient words that seemed to vibrate in the heavy air. Next, a young, healthy pig was led out, squealing in protest. This sacrifice felt different, heavier. The pig, often symbolizing earth and sustenance, was perhaps an offering to the ground itself, an appeasement. Master No's chanting grew louder, more intense, as he dispatched the animal. Its blood, darker, thicker, was used to paint complex symbols onto strips of yellow paper, talismans. These were placed at the 4 cardinal points of the plot. Then came the most unsettling part. Master No approached Ba Quan. "Your hair," he commanded quietly. Confused, Ba Quan hesitated, but Mi Lin urged him forward. Master No carefully snipped a lock of Ba Quan's hair, wrapped it in another talisman, and instructed Ba Quan to bury it himself near the spot designated for the house's foundation. Anchoring the living to the land, binding the ritual's protection directly to the family patriarch. It felt deeply personal, invasive. The entire ceremony stretched for over 2 hours, under the watchful, heavy sky of Vong Shuyan. The air grew thick with the coppery smell of blood, the pungent aroma of incense, and the strange, resonant vibrations of Master No's chanting. Finally, he fell silent, surveying his work. He pressed his fingers together, eyes closed for a long moment, then turned to the anxious couple. "The wards are set," he announced, his voice returning to its normal quiet tone, though his eyes still held an unsettling intensity. "The immediate energy is suppressed. But..." He raised a thin finger, emphasizing the word. "This is a truce, not a conquest. The underlying power here is immense. Listen carefully." He fixed Ba Quan with his piercing gaze. "You must follow my instructions absolutely. Worship only on this designated plot, make regular offerings as I have shown you, especially during the 7th month. Do not be foolish enough to disturb the ground beyond these boundaries, do not dig wells where I haven't indicated, do not expand your fields onto neighboring unclaimed land. Stay within the protected space. To encroach is to invite disaster. The spirits here remember violence, do not offer them new reasons for anger." His gaze then shifted, landing on Young'un, who had watched the entire proceeding with wide, unnerved eyes. Master No stared at the boy for a long, silent moment, an assessing look that made Mi Lin gasp and pull in closer. Ba Quan felt a cold dread snake down his spine. And this one, Master No's voice dropped to a near whisper, laden with a chilling gravity. "Your son. He walks close to the veil already. This land, it will call to him. Be vigilant. Guard him well. Ensure he is not lost." Lost? The word hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Lost to what? Ba Quan, the pragmatist, the soldier, felt a fear colder than any he'd known on the battlefield. He saw the absolute certainty in Master No's eyes, the conviction that transcended mere superstition. This wasn't just folklore, it was a diagnosis, a prophecy delivered by someone who knew. He nodded mutely, unable to speak. Mi Lin was openly weeping, clutching, and Master No accepted their silent acquiescence, collected the payment Ba Quan offered, a significant sum, but one Ba Quan now paid without resentment, and turned to leave. He paused at the edge of the warded land, looking back one last time. "Remember the boundaries," he warned again, his voice barely audible, before melting back into the Volngshudian twilight as unobtrusively as he had arrived. They stood there for a long time, the parents and the child, enveloped by the sudden, heavy silence of the plot. The smell of blood and incense lingered. The ground felt different, somehow contained, but the air beyond the blood-drawn perimeter seemed darker, waiting. Ba Quan looked at the spot where his hair was buried, then at his son, whose eyes still seemed fixed on the place where the sorcerer had vanished. He had bought his land, paid the price, and received his protection. But the sorcerer's final words echoed, a chilling counterpoint to the fragile hope the ritual offered. "Guard him well. Ensure he is not lost." An uneasy peace settled over the land, yes, but it was a peace bought with blood and bound by warnings, fragile as a layer of morning mist over ground that held too many secrets, too many sorrows. The work of building could begin, but the shadow of the unseen had been acknowledged, invited in, and now held a stake in their future. Perhaps it required an expert in shadows themselves. Ba Quan, a man who had faced down enemy fire and survived horrors that defied description, finally conceded, not defeat, precisely, but an acknowledgement that some battles required weapons beyond his understanding. Mi Lin's fear, stark and unwavering, coupled with the land's heavy, watchful silence and the persistent whispers from the nearby townspeople, wore down his defenses. Fine. He would indulge this spiritual necessity. For Lin's peace of mind. Foreign. Maybe, just maybe, even for himself. Finding such an expert, however, wasn't a simple matter of consulting a directory. Men like the one Mi Lin spoke of, practitioners of the old ways, keepers of knowledge that straddled the line between reverence and fear, didn't advertise. Their names were passed in hushed tones, often accompanied by warnings as much as recommendations. It took discreet inquiries, a journey to a neighboring district known for its ancient temples and lingering traditions, before they were directed to Master No. He arrived not with fanfare, but like a drift of smoke, unassuming yet fundamentally altering the atmosphere. Master No was small, wiry, his back slightly stooped as if carrying an invisible weight. His skin was the color of dark teakwood, weathered and creased, and his simple black tunic seemed to absorb the sunlight rather than reflect it. He could have been any aging peasant farmer, except for his eyes. Deep-set, unervingly bright, they seemed to pierce through pretense, stripping away the mundane to see the underlying currents of energy and intent. Ba Quan, accustomed to assessing men quickly, found himself instantly uncomfortable under that gaze, unable to meet it directly for more than a fleeting second. There was no obvious heroic spirit, no scholarly air, just an unnerving stillness, a profound depth that hinted at knowledge best left undisturbed. Master No wasted no time on pleasantries. He walked the perimeter of the plot, his bare feet seeming to test the soil's temper. He'd pause, head tilted as if listening to something inaudible to Ba Quan and Mi Lin, who followed at a respectful distance, and clinging tightly to his mother's hand. Master No occasionally bent down, crumbling dirt between his fingers, sniffing the air with a concentration that was almost animalistic. He lingered near the crumbling wall of the old infirmary, his eyes tracing lines in the air, mapping unseen flows. Finally, he stopped near the center of the plot, turning slowly to face them. "The earth here, it weeps," he stated simply, his voice surprisingly resonant for his small frame. "Too much blood. Too much sorrow left untended. The Yin energy is thick, stagnant. Like a bruise on the land that never healed." He looked directly at Ba Quan. "You wish to build a life here?" Ba Quan swallowed, his usual gruffness momentarily failing him. "We bought the land. We need a home." Master No nodded slowly. "Need is a powerful force. But this ground has its own occupants, its own needs. They are resentful." He gestured vaguely. "To build, you must first make peace. Or, at least, establish boundaries they will respect. It requires a negotiation." The negotiation, as it turned out, was a ceremony far more elaborate and visceral than Ba Quan had anticipated. Master No directed the preparations with quiet authority. An altar was erected, facing a specific direction Master No determined by observing the sun and shadows. Offerings were laid out, not just fruit and incense, but raw meat, potent rice wine, and specific herbs Master No produced from a worn cloth bag. Then came the sacrifices. For healthy roosters, their feathers gleaming in the afternoon light, were brought forward. Master No selected a knife with a handle wrapped in dark, stained leather. With swift, economical movements that spoke of long practice, he slit each bird's throat, catching the bright, steaming blood in earthenware bowls. The life force, the young energy of the roosters, was needed to counter the land's pervasive een. He walked the perimeter again, carefully dribbling the blood in a precise pattern, chanting in a low, guttural language that Ba Quan didn't recognize, ancient words that seemed to vibrate in the heavy air. Next, a young, healthy pig was led out, squealing in protest. This sacrifice felt different, heavier. The pig, often symbolizing earth and sustenance, was perhaps an offering to the ground itself, an appeasement. Master No's chanting grew louder, more intense, as he dispatched the animal. Its blood, darker, thicker, was used to paint complex symbols onto strips of yellow paper, talismans. These were placed at the 4 cardinal points of the plot. Then came the most unsettling part. Master No approached Ba Quan. "Your hair," he commanded quietly. Confused, Ba Quan hesitated, but Mi Lin urged him forward. Master No carefully snipped a lock of Ba Quan's hair, wrapped it in another talisman, and instructed Ba Quan to bury it himself near the spot designated for the house's foundation. Anchoring the living to the land, binding the ritual's protection directly to the family patriarch. It felt deeply personal, invasive. The entire ceremony stretched for over 2 hours, under the watchful, heavy sky of Vong Shuyan. The air grew thick with the coppery smell of blood, the pungent aroma of incense, and the strange, resonant vibrations of Master No's chanting. Finally, he fell silent, surveying his work. He pressed his fingers together, eyes closed for a long moment, then turned to the anxious couple. "The wards are set," he announced, his voice returning to its normal quiet tone, though his eyes still held an unsettling intensity. "The immediate energy is suppressed. But..." He raised a thin finger, emphasizing the word. "This is a truce, not a conquest. The underlying power here is immense. Listen carefully." He fixed Ba Quan with his piercing gaze. "You must follow my instructions absolutely. Worship only on this designated plot, make regular offerings as I have shown you, especially during the 7th month. Do not be foolish enough to disturb the ground beyond these boundaries, do not dig wells where I haven't indicated, do not expand your fields onto neighboring unclaimed land. Stay within the protected space. To encroach is to invite disaster. The spirits here remember violence, do not offer them new reasons for anger." His gaze then shifted, landing on Young'un, who had watched the entire proceeding with wide, unnerved eyes. Master No stared at the boy for a long, silent moment, an assessing look that made Mi Lin gasp and pull him closer. Ba Quan felt a cold dread snake down his spine. "And this one," Master No's voice dropped to a near whisper, laden with a chilling gravity. "Your son. He walks close to the veil already. This land, it will call to him. Be vigilant. Guard him well. Ensure he is not lost." Lost? The word hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Lost to what? Ba Quan, the pragmatist, the soldier, felt a fear colder than any he'd known on the battlefield. He saw the absolute certainty in Master No's eyes, the conviction that transcended mere superstition. This wasn't just folklore, it was a diagnosis, a prophecy delivered by someone who knew. He nodded mutely, unable to speak. Mi Lin was openly weeping, clutching, and Master No accepted their silent acquiescence, collected the payment Ba Quan offered, a significant sum, but one Ba Quan now paid without resentment, and turned to leave. He paused at the edge of the warded land, looking back one last time. "Remember the boundaries," he warned again, his voice barely audible, before melting back into the Vongshuyan twilight as unobtrusively as he had arrived. They stood there for a long time, the parents and the child, enveloped by the sudden, heavy silence of the plot. The smell of blood and incense lingered. The ground felt different, somehow contained, but the air beyond the blood-drawn perimeter seemed darker, waiting. Ba Quan looked at the spot where his hair was buried, then at his son, whose eyes still seemed fixed on the place where the sorcerer had vanished. He had bought his land, paid the price, and received his protection. But the sorcerer's final words echoed, a chilling counterpoint to the fragile hope the ritual offered. "Guard him well. Ensure he is not lost." An uneasy peace settled over the land, yes, but it was a peace bought with blood and bound by warnings, fragile as a layer of morning mist over ground that held too many secrets, too many sorrows. The work of building could begin, but the shadow of the unseen had been acknowledged, invited in, and now held a stake in their future. Alone in the decaying house, a chill deeper than the rain settled over him, leaving him shivering not just from the damp, but from a cold that seeped into his bones. The ghost girl's horrifying visage burned behind his eyelids. Outside, oblivious, the night deepened, swallowing the last vestiges of twilight. Back at their partially built house, Mi-Lin paced, her initial annoyance at Anne's lateness curdling into a tight knot of dread. 7 o'clock came and went. Then 8. The steady drizzle continued, each drop amplifying the silence where a boy's footsteps should have been. Where was he? Her heart hammered against her ribs. Anne. Anne. Her calls, initially hopeful, grew thin and reedy against the vast, indifferent quiet of Vongshuyan. She rushed out, heedless of the mud sucking at her sandals, knocking frantically on the few neighbors' doors within shouting distance. Had they seen him? Playing near the creek? Chasing dragonflies? The answers were frustratingly consistent. Yes, they'd seen him earlier, heading home before the sky truly darkened, before 6. Home. But he wasn't home. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through Mi-Lin. She ran back, locking the door, a futile gesture against the formless fear gripping her, and plunged back into the night, her calls becoming increasingly desperate. She enlisted help. Lanterns bobbed through the darkness as neighbors, drawn by her cries, fanned out. They searched the muddy paths, the overgrown edges of the rubber plantation, the banks of the nearby stream. Nothing. It was as if the damp earth had simply swallowed him whole. Ba Quan returned from a day spent negotiating supplies in town to find chaos, his wife near hysterics, neighbors murmuring grim possibilities. Kidnapping. It wasn't unheard of, children sometimes snatched and sold across the border. Or perhaps he'd fallen into the stream, swollen by the rains. Ba Quan organized the search parties, his military training kicking in, imposing order on the rising panic. Flashlight beams sliced through the oppressive darkness, voices called Anne's name until throats were raw. They searched for hours. Hours turned into a gaping void where hope dwindled. And through the practicalities of the search, through the reassurances he offered his wife, Ba Quan felt a cold dread coalesce in his gut. Master knows words. Guard him well. Ensure he is not lost. Lost. The prophecy, dismissed just weeks ago as arcane pronouncements, now felt terrifyingly real. He saw the sorcerer's piercing eyes, felt again the unsettling weight of that warning. He tried to push it away, exhaustion, fear playing tricks on his mind. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each fruitless hour. This wasn't a simple case of a lost child. He knew it, with a certainty that chilled him more than the night air. By midnight, with no sign of an, Ba Quan made the decision. His skepticism, his pride, crumbled under the weight of primal fear for his son. He found the scrap of paper with the contact information Master No had reluctantly provided. His fingers trembled as he sought out someone with a working telephone to relay the message. Master No arrived near dawn, appearing as quietly and suddenly as before. He took in the scene, the exhausted searchers, Mi Lin's tear-streaked face, Ba Quan's grim expression, with an unnerving calm. He didn't ask questions. He simply walked towards the family's plot, standing with his hands clasped behind his back, surveying the area in the gray pre-dawn light. He stood motionless for several minutes, eyes scanning the ground, the nearby dilapidated clinic, and lingering on the massive, ancient banyan tree that dominated the edge of the property. Its sprawling roots clawed at the earth like gnarled fingers, its canopy a dense black shadow against the lightening sky. After a long silence, he turned back to the house, his gaze settling on Ba Quan. 5 earthenware cups, he instructed. Half a kilo of fresh sticky rice flour. And a black dog. A black dog? At this hour? But before Ba Quan could voice the impossibility, their neighbor, old Xian, shuffled forward. Master No, he said hesitantly, my family, we have an old black dog. Mang. He is very old. Near his time. Perhaps he can serve. Xian looked wretched, but also held a glimmer of hope, perhaps seeing a final purpose for his ailing companion. Master No considered for a moment, then nodded slowly. Bring him. Ba Quan rushed to fetch the flour and cups while Xian returned moments later, carrying the frail body of Mang. The dog was little more than skin and bone, its breath coming in shallow rasps, but its eyes, dark and cloudy, still held a spark of awareness. Master No worked quickly. He poured the sticky rice flour into the 5 cups, arranging them in a specific pattern near the front gate. He lit a thick bundle of incense, the heavy, sweet smoke momentarily chasing away the damp morning chill. Planting the smoldering incense directly into the earth before the cups, he began to chant, low and rhythmic, words unintelligible yet carrying an undeniable power. He bowed deeply, then, to the collective gasp of the gathered onlookers, he drew his dark-handled knife and plunged it swiftly into the neck of the dying black dog. Mang, despite his weakness, yelped, a thin, piercing sound of agony and surprise. The shock seemed to jolt unnatural energy into his frail limbs. He scrambled free from Xian's grasp and bolted, staggering but determined, trailing drops of dark blood. Master No immediately gave chase, surprisingly agile for his age. The dog didn't run far. It veered directly towards the ancient banyan tree, circled its massive base once, let out a final, choked cry, and collapsed, dead. Master No stopped beside the animal, breathing heavily, and slowly raised his arm, pointing upwards into the dense foliage of the banyan. A collective gasp went through the crowd. High, impossibly high amongst the thickest branches, clinging tightly, was the small, still figure of an. How could a child, any child, have climbed so high? The banyan's trunk was massive, its bark smooth and slippery with age and dampness. Even skilled adult climbers would struggle. Yet there he was. It took several men, carefully navigating the treacherous limbs, to finally reach him and lower his limp body to the ground. He was cold, unresponsive, breathing shallowly but utterly unconscious. No amount of shaking or calling his name roused him. Master No knelt beside the boy, placing his fingers on N's wrist and forehead. He examined the boy's eyes, then looked towards the banyan tree, then back at the dead dog. He sighed, a sound heavy with resignation. The tree root, he instructed Ba Quan. Dig up a portion of the main root facing the house. Burn it to ash. Mix the ash with water. Make him drink when he wakes. Without further explanation, Master No turned and left, leaving the bewildered and terrified family with their unconscious son in cryptic instructions. They did as commanded, and remained lost to the world for 4 agonizing days. When he finally opened his eyes, the relief that flooded Mi Lin and Ba Quan was short-lived. Something was terribly wrong. The spark in his eyes was gone. He stared blankly, unresponsive, seemingly unaware of his surroundings. He wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak. He was physically present, but his spirit, his essence, it felt absent. Soulless. This was worse, somehow, than him being lost. This was a terrifying emptiness. Ba Quan, swallowing his pride entirely now, contacted Master No again. The sorcerer was away, tending to affairs involving a disturbed grave site far to the south in Da Nang, but promised to return within the week. It was the longest week of Ba Quan and Mi Lin's lives. They watched helplessly as An faded, his skin growing paler, his small body weaker. He refused all food, sustained only by sips of water Mi Lin patiently spooned between his listless lips. True to his word, Master No reappeared exactly 7 days later. He went straight to An's bedside, felt his pulse, examined his vacant eyes, and let out a heavy sigh. He lingered too long on the other side. Part of him was claimed, anchored. He looked at Ba Quan. To pull him fully back, to sever that connection, requires potent measures. Something from the realm of death itself. His eyes held a grim light. You must acquire a piece of wood from a coffin. Specifically, from the funeral of someone who died recently, preferably violently. The request was monstrous. Grave robbing. Desecration. But looking at An's empty gaze, Ba Quan knew he had no choice. Fate, or perhaps cruel irony, provided an opportunity. A notorious local gangster, Man Ho, fierce tiger, known for his brutality and feared throughout the district, had met a suitably violent end just days before, his head split open in a bloody dispute. His funeral was currently underway, a tense affair heavily guarded by his volatile associates. Asking for a piece of the coffin was unthinkable. Ba Quan tried anyway, driven by desperation. He approached the grieving, hostile family, explaining his son's plight. He was met with curses and blows, driven away bruised and humiliated. But failure wasn't an option. That night, under the cloak of darkness, Ba Quan crept back. Heart pounding, he managed to evade the guards, reach the coffin, and quickly carve a small sliver of wood from the underside of the lid with his knife. But a stray sound alerted the guards. He was caught, beaten savagely, kicked and punched until his head bled, but he clung fiercely to the precious shard of wood. He stumbled home, battered and bloodied, presenting the grisly prize to Master No. The sorcerer wasted no time. He took the blood-stained wood, crushed it into a rough powder using a stone mortar, and boiled it in a small pot of water. The resulting liquid was dark, murky. Holding it firmly, Master No pinched the boy's nose and forced the vile concoction down his throat. And gagged, his body convulsing, then vomited violently. A thick, black, slimy sludge poured from his mouth, reeking of decay. Ba Quan and Mi Lin recoiled in horror, but Master No peered intently at the mess. Entwined within the black bile was a disturbing amount of hair. Long, black strands of hair. Master No looked from the vomit to the distant banyan tree, visible through the open doorway. The land's resentment runs deep, he murmured. And the girl. But as in finished retching, a transformation occurred. Color flooded back into his face. His eyes, previously dull and vacant, suddenly focused, blinking in confusion, then recognition. He looked at his mother, his father. And then, miraculously, he spoke, his voice weak but clear. Mama. Papa. I'm hungry. Tears streamed down Mi Lin's face. Ba Quan felt a wave of relief so profound it almost brought him to his knees. And devoured 5 bowls of rice porridge, his appetite ravenous. He was back. Yet, as Mi Lin fussed over her son, Ba Quan saw the lingering gravity in Master No's expression. The sorcerer stepped outside, lighting a hand-rolled cigarette, inhaling deeply. He is back, Master No said, smoke curling around his words. For now. But I told you, this land is saturated with death. It is not meant for the living in its current state. And your son, he fixed Ba Quan with that piercing gaze again. He is a beacon to them. The link, once forged, is not easily broken. You must be more vigilant than ever. The danger has not passed. It has merely receded. The warning hung there, a chilling promise that this ordeal, profound and terrifying as it was, might only be the beginning. The warning hung heavy in the air long after Master No had departed, a chilling resonance that undercut the family's profound relief. And was back, yes, his laughter occasionally echoing through the simple structure they were slowly, painstakingly raising on the troubled land. He ate with the vigor of a boy restored, the hollowness in his eyes replaced by youthful curiosity once more. Yet, the ordeal had left its mark. He was quieter, more watchful, sometimes staring intently at the edge of the woods or the looming presence of the ancient banyan tree with an expression his parents couldn't quite decipher. And Ba Quan, despite his outward return to pragmatic concerns of construction and providing, felt the nagging persistence of the sorcerer's words. The link, once forged, is not easily broken. Reactive cures, even ones as potent and disturbing as the coffin wood ritual, clearly weren't enough. Understanding the nature of the unseen forces clinging to this land, the source of its resentment and its particular pull on his son, felt increasingly necessary. Appeasement, perhaps? Or direct communication? How did one even begin to negotiate with ghosts? It was Master No who initiated the next step, reappearing 3 days later as silently as ever, but this time, he was not alone. With him was a young woman, or perhaps girl, it was hard to tell her age precisely, maybe late teens or early 20s. She was petite, almost bird-like, and dressed entirely in vibrant red silk, a stark contrast to Master No's somber black. A matching red scarf was draped artfully over the lower half of her face, obscuring her features from the nose down, and fine, embroidered brocade slippers peeked out from beneath her trousers. Her visible skin, hands and the upper part of her face, was unnaturally pale, smooth as porcelain, and her fingernails were painted the same startling crimson as her clothes. A faint, cloying scent of cinnamon blossoms clung to her, an aroma both sweet and vaguely funereal. What was most unsettling, however, was her utter silence and stillness. She moved with a fluid grace but seemed entirely detached, her eyes, the only feature truly visible, dark and vacant, staring straight ahead, acknowledging no one. And, usually curious about visitors, instinctively shrank back behind his mother, his small hand tightening its grip. Mi Lin murmured a prayer under her breath. Even Ba Quan felt a prickle of profound unease stir beneath his practiced stoicism. There was something fundamentally wrong about this girl. Master No ushered Ba Quan and Mi Lin inside, leaving the girl standing motionlessly by the doorway like an exquisitely dressed statue. The cures have restored the boy's vitality, Master No began, his voice low, but his spirit remains vulnerable. The land calls to him because it recognizes a kinship, an openness. We treated the symptom, the spiritual intrusion. Now, we must understand the source. We must speak to those who linger here. Ba Quan frowned. Speak to them? How? Not us directly. Master No gestured briefly towards the silent figure outside. Through her. She is a vessel. A borrowed key to unlock a closed door. He explained, briefly, that she was from Hok Mon, trained in the difficult and dangerous art of mediumship, capable of allowing spirits to temporarily inhabit her body and speak through her lips. It is necessary, Master No stressed, to understand who resides here, what they want. Only then can a lasting peace be negotiated. He warned them the process was not without risk, both to the medium and potentially to those witnessing it. Absolute discretion was paramount, no neighbors could know. The ritual must take place under the cover of darkness. Hesitantly, seeing little alternative, Ba Quan agreed. The preparations began as night fell, cloaked in secrecy. Master No directed the setup with meticulous care, selecting a spot outdoors within the warded perimeter but away from the house itself. A clean mat was laid down. Offerings were arranged precisely, a tray laden with steaming white rice, a bowl of clear rice wine reflecting the starlight, small mounds of salt, fresh water, fruits, and bundles of joss paper. 2 simple oil lamps cast flickering, uncertain light. Master No lit a bundle of thick incense sticks, planting them firmly in the earth. The girl in red was led to the mat, where she sat, perfectly still, eyes closed, seemingly oblivious. And, despite his parents' reluctance, insisted on watching, his earlier fear now overshadowed by a morbid, childlike curiosity. He huddled close to his father, understanding little but sensing the solemn gravity of the moment. Master No began to chant again, the same resonant, unfamiliar language as before, the syllables rising and falling in a hypnotic cadence. He held another rooster, its eyes wide with terror in the lamplight. As the chant reached a crescendo, he swiftly slit the bird's throat, letting the dark blood spatter onto the ground around the seated medium, creating another, smaller circle of potent life force. Then, raising his face to the star-dusted sky, he called out, his voice ringing with command, "Spirits of this place. You who linger between worlds. Be you god or demon, soldier or forgotten soul, come forth. Accept this offering. Let your voices be heard." The air crackled. A sudden, unnatural gust of wind swept through the clearing, extinguishing the oil lamps instantly, plunging them into near darkness relieved only by the glowing tips of the incense sticks. The smoke from the incense thickened, swirling, then abruptly flared, catching fire with an audible whoosh, casting eerie, dancing shadows. Panic flickered through the small group. Before they could react, the girl in red gasped, her chest puffing out sharply, her breathing becoming rapid and ragged. A low groan escaped her lips, followed by a series of guttural clicks and whistles, sounds utterly alien. Then, a voice emerged, high-pitched, strangely accented. Ba Quan thought it sounded vaguely Taiwanese, though he couldn't be sure. It wasn't the girl's voice. Simultaneously, Master No seemed to stiffen, his own eyes taking on a distant glaze, his voice, when he spoke, holding a subtle echo of the medium's strange cadence. "They are present," he announced, his gaze fixed on the trembling girl. "Ask your questions. Quickly. The connection is fragile. We have only the time it takes for this incense to burn." Ba Quan, jolted into action, stepped forward, clasping his hands respectfully as Master No had instructed. "Spirits," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "we are new here. We mean no disrespect. If our presence offends, please forgive us. Tell us what you need, what troubles you, so we may live in peace." From behind the red scarf, a cacophony erupted. Not one voice, but dozens, overlapping, whispering, groaning, fragments of Vietnamese, clipped phrases that sounded like military commands in English or perhaps French, choked sobs, angry shouts. It was a wave of pure anguish and confusion, washing over them, making Mi Lin cry out and cover her ears, making him bury his face in his father's side. Ba Quan felt his own blood run cold. So many trapped here. The chaotic noise lasted for nearly a minute, then abruptly ceased. Silence descended again, thick and expectant. Then, a single voice emerged from the medium, clearer this time, tinged with sadness, feminine. "We meant the boy no harm." The voice identified itself as belonging to a young woman, a guerrilla nurse from the fighting in Zone Delta, killed years ago. "My grave is far from here. But I linger. Like the others." She spoke of the soldiers, Vietnamese and American alike, who fell in the battle fought on this ground. Their violent deaths, the lack of proper rites, had trapped them. They still carried the echoes of their final conflict, spectral figures reenacting battles, but they held no malice towards the living. "We are just hungry," the voice whispered, a profound, echoing hunger that seemed to resonate from the very soil. "Lost. Cold." Regarding him, she explained the ghost girl he saw, the one who had lured him away, was simply another trapped spirit, drawn to his youthful energy, wanting only company, not malice. He looked like a playmate. "We forget, sometimes." A wave of pity washed over Ba Quan, momentarily eclipsing his fear. Trapped soldiers, a lonely nurse, victims, just like his own comrades had been. He bowed his head. "We understand," he said, his voice thick. "We will not forget you. We promise. Every month, on the 16th day of the lunar calendar, we will make offerings. Food. Incense. Joss paper. Whatever you require. Just, let my son live in peace. Let us live in peace. As he finished speaking, the last incense stick sputtered and died. The girl in red slumped forward, suddenly limp, her breathing returning to normal, though she remained silent, eyes closed. Master No stirred, the distant look fading from his eyes. He helped the medium gently to her feet. Ba Quan and Mi Lin, hearts pounding, looked towards the offering tray they had set out. It was empty. Utterly, impossibly empty. Not a grain of rice, not a drop of wine remained. It wasn't just eaten, it was as if the offerings themselves had simply ceased to exist the moment the incense died. Mi Lin gasped. Ba Quan stared, speechless. Master No nodded gravely. They have accepted, he said quietly. The bargain is struck. Remember your promise, Ba Quan. These spirits, be they hungry ghosts or resentful demons, operate on a principle of reciprocity. They have accepted your offering, your acknowledgement. In return, they will abide by the truce, so long as you keep your word. He looked towards the dark outline of the house. Make the offerings. Keep the boundaries. And perhaps this land will finally begin to heal. An uneasy quiet settled once more, but this time, it felt different. Not just suppressed, but acknowledged. A fragile understanding had been reached across the veil. But the knowledge of who shared their land, and the weight of the promise made, added another layer to the shadows that clung to their new home in Vong Shuyan. Peace had been negotiated, but it required constant vigilance, a perpetual feeding of the unseen sorrows rooted in the soil. The uneasy quiet that followed the séance was a fragile thing. While the monthly offerings seemed to placate the restless spirits tied to their land in Vong Shuyan, a deeper disquiet settled within Ba Quan. The ritual, the medium's borrowed voice speaking of trapped soldiers and spectral hunger, had stirred something buried deep within him, memories of another time, another land saturated not just with yin energy, but with the tangible stench of death and the constant thrum of violence. He looked at his son, and, now restored but still carrying that unnerving sensitivity, and saw echoes of his own younger self, a self thrown into the inferno of Cambodia in 1978. The connection Master No shared with him, Ba Quan realized, wasn't just forged by the haunted soil they now occupied, its roots went deeper, tangled in the blood-soaked earth of a war that refused to stay buried. He rarely spoke of it. What words could possibly capture the reality? Ba Quan had been barely 19, swept up in the patriotic fervor following the brutal border incursions by the Khmer Rouge. His mind filled with images of heroism, of liberating a suffering neighbor, he'd eagerly volunteered, brushing aside his own mother's tears and the quiet apprehension in his fiancée Mi Lin's eyes. The reality, however, hit him like a physical blow the moment they crossed the border. Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge wasn't just a battlefield, it was a charnel house. The air itself felt diseased, heavy with humidity and the cloying sweetness of decay. Their marches took them through eerily silent villages where the only inhabitants were bloated corpses crawling with maggots, victims of Pol Pot's monstrous regime, often killed days or weeks before the Vietnamese troops arrived. Chickens, dogs, people, everything slaughtered. They learned quickly the meaning of Angkor's reign of terror. He remembered the first time they found the heads, dozens of them, tied together with wire, bobbing grotesquely in the current of a river they needed for drinking water. He remembered burying his own comrades, singing revolutionary songs at the top of their lungs, not out of fervor, but to drown out the sounds of their own fear and the oppressive silence of the jungle. The enemy was brutal, elusive, often indistinguishable from the terrified civilians they oppressed. Fierce firefights erupted suddenly from the dense foliage, often ending with heavy losses on both sides and little ground gained. Many Vietnamese soldiers were, like Ba Quan, young, poorly trained, thrown into a meat grinder with little understanding of the political complexities, fueled only by duty and the primal instinct to survive. It was during this chaotic period, perhaps 6 months into his deployment, that Ba Quan's path irrevocably crossed with the man he would later know as Master No. Ba Quan, recognized for his steadiness under fire, was tasked with delivering urgent dispatches back towards a rear command post, a long, perilous journey. Due to the dangers, he traveled with a mixed convoy, a few other soldiers, a contingent of youth volunteers sent to clear roads, and some civilians hoping for safer passage away from the fighting zones. Among the civilians was a quiet, unassuming man, older than Ba Quan by perhaps a decade, small and wiry, dressed in simple black. He introduced himself as Tuc, an incense seller from Hok Mon who had volunteered for road work. He rarely spoke, keeping mostly to himself, his observant, unervingly bright eyes taking everything in. The journey was tense, the roads notorious for ambushes and mines. They stopped for a brief rest beside a seemingly clear stretch of road. Most stayed with the truck, wary of leaving the relative safety of the group. Only Ba Quan, needing to relieve himself, and Tuc, who seemed to simply want to stretch his legs, moved a short distance away into the roadside scrub. That small decision saved their lives. A deafening explosion ripped through the air, the force throwing them both flat. Shrapnel whizzed overhead. When the ringing in Ba Quan's ear subsided, he looked back towards the road. Where the truck had been, there was only smoke, fire, and a horrific rain of fragments. Flesh, metal, unrecognizable debris. The truck had hit a massive anti-tank mine. Everyone else, soldiers, volunteers, civilians, gone. Instantly obliterated. Shock gave way to nausea. Ba Quan saw Tuc, already moving amidst the carnage, calmly picking up pieces of human remains, placing them gently into a makeshift hammock sling. Numbly, Ba Quan joined him. It was a gruesome, soul-crushing task. They gathered over 30 kilograms of flesh and bone fragments, the unrecognizable remnants of at least 6 people. There was no way to carry them back, no way to identify them. The journey ahead was long, through hostile jungle. They buried the collected remains together in a shallow grave beside the road, marking it with a simple pile of stones, whispering prayers for souls they couldn't name. Ba Quan felt a strange kinship with the quiet incense seller, a bond forged in the immediate aftermath of shared survival against impossible odds. He realized later it was perhaps the luckiest moment of his life, a few steps into the bushes separating him from instant vaporization. They continued the journey alone, 2 figures moving through a landscape of death. The shared trauma loosened Tuc's reserve slightly, though he still revealed little about himself. The trek was arduous. Days blurred into a monotonous cycle of marching, hiding, and constant vigilance. One sweltering afternoon, while scouting near a stream, they stumbled right into a Khmer Rouge patrol, 5 hardened soldiers emerging suddenly from the trees. Ba Quan and Tuc dove into a thick bush, knives drawn. Their rifles had been lost in the explosion. They lay frozen, hearts pounding, as the patrol approached. They were almost past when disaster struck. A venomous green viper, disturbed by Ba Quan's sudden movement, wrapped itself around his leg and struck, fangs sinking deep. Ba Quan gasped in pain, instinctively grabbing the snake, but the sound, however small, alerted the patrol. Voices shouted. They turned, spotting the movement in the bush. Bullets ripped through the leaves above their heads. Run! Ba Quan choked out, adrenaline momentarily overriding the snakebite's fire. They scrambled out, Tuc shouting directions, running low, dodging through the trees as bullets whizzed past. In their panicked flight, they didn't see the hidden ravine until it was too late. The ground simply vanished beneath them. They plunged downwards, landing not with a bone-jarring impact, but with a sickeningly soft thud. Darkness enveloped them, thick and cloying, filled with an overpowering stench, the unmistakable, unforgettable smell of mass death. Ba Quan gagged, realizing they were lying on something yielding, wet, and horrifyingly familiar. Tuc immediately clamped a hand over Ba Quan's mouth, listening intently. Footsteps pounded above them, then faded away. When silence returned, Tuc risked flicking his lighter. The small flame illuminated a nightmare. They were at the bottom of a deep pit, lying atop a tangled heap of decomposing human bodies, piled several layers deep. Victims of an execution, likely killed with knives or bayonets. Maggots writhed. Right beside Tuc's face was a skull, its empty eye sockets teeming with white worms. Ba Quan retched uncontrollably. Yet, amidst this abject horror, Tuc remained astonishingly calm. His eyes scanned the ravine walls in the flickering light. Spotting small cracks and crevices, he somehow, inexplicably, began to climb, moving with a speed and agility that defied the circumstances and his slight build. Reaching the lip of the ravine, he lowered a makeshift rope fashioned from vines and hauled the terrified, snake-bitten Ba Quan up after him. Ba Quan knew then, with absolute certainty, this was no ordinary incense seller. Escaping the ravine didn't end their ordeal. They were lost, deep in enemy territory, without food, water, or functioning firearms. The snake venom pulsed painfully in Ba Quan's leg. Maggots, transferred from the pit, crawled on their skin and clothes, a constant, disgusting reminder. The smell of death clung to them, impervious to the jungle damp. Ba Quan, feverish and despairing, began to falter. But Tuc pressed on, revealing an intimate knowledge of the jungle. He found edible tubers Ba Quan wouldn't have recognized, located hidden seepages of water in rock faces, treated Ba Quan's snakebite with poultices made from chewed leaves. For 2 days, he kept them alive. On the 3rd day, delirious with hunger, they stumbled upon a village. Hope surged, quickly followed by despair. It was deserted, abandoned, another casualty of the war. Ba Quan collapsed, weeping like a child. Tuc, ever stoic, searched the empty huts. Their only find, a single, starving dog, ribs showing, left behind by the fleeing villagers. The choice was grim but necessary. They killed the dog, cooked its meager meat over a small fire, and huddled together in an empty hut as darkness fell, trying to regain strength. Ba Quan couldn't sleep. Hunger gnawed at him, but so did the unsettling presence of his companion and the horrors they'd endured. Suddenly, a faint, sweet fragrance drifted on the night air, accompanied by the distant sound of tinkling laughter, impossibly delicate in this desolate place. Ignoring Tuc's exhausted sleep, Ba Quan crept outside. Moonlight silvered the abandoned village. Following the scent, he reached a stream cascading over rocks near the edge of the jungle. There, bathing in a moonlit pool, was a young woman of ethereal beauty, adorned with gold bracelets, her clothes resembling traditional Cambodian silk. He hid, watching, entranced. When she finished bathing and moved towards an old, dilapidated temple nearby, he ran after her, thinking she represented help, civilization. But she moved like the wind, vanishing through the temple doorway before he could reach her. He tried again the next night, and the next, always with the same result, despite Tuc's stern warnings. Don't follow her, Quan. It's dangerous. She's not what she seems. A hungry ghost, luring the unwary. Ba Quan, desperate, refused to believe it. One rainy night, drawn again by the fragrance and laughter, he saw her near the temple. Wait. He called out, identifying himself as a Vietnamese soldier. She fled towards the temple door and vanished as usual. This time, driven by curiosity and frustration, Ba Quan pushed open the creaking temple door. Inside, dust lay thick on broken statues. Then, a flash of lightning illuminated the interior. He froze. There, at the base of the far wall, was the girl, soaking wet, sitting huddled with her face pressed against the stone, facing away from him. He took a hesitant step forward, heart pounding. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I won't hurt you." A hand clamped down hard on his shoulder. He spun around, startled. It was Tuc, his eyes blazing in the dim light, a knife gleaming in his hand. Before Ba Quan could react, Tuc wiped the blade on his shirt, grabbed Ba Quan's left hand, and swiftly, deliberately, sliced the tip of his middle finger. Pain lanced up Ba Quan's arm. Shocked, bewildered, he stammered, pointing towards the figure by the wall, "Tuc, the girl." Tuc didn't look. He simply held Ba Quan's gaze. Then, slowly, Ba Quan turned back towards the wall. The girl was still there. But now, she wasn't huddled. She was hanging from a beam, neck broken, swaying slightly in the draft, dressed in the same silks, adorned with the same gold bracelets. Dead. Utterly, undeniably dead. The world tilted. Ba Quan's vision tunneled, darkness rushing in as he lost consciousness, vaguely aware of strong arms catching him before he hit the dusty floor. He understood nothing, except that he had survived again, saved by a man who wielded knives against both the living and the dead, a man whose true nature remained a terrifying enigma. He understood nothing, except that he had survived again, saved by a man who wielded knives against both the living and the dead, a man whose true nature remained a terrifying enigma. Who was this quiet incense seller, this man called Tuc? Ba Quan, recovering slowly from the ordeal in the abandoned Cambodian village, found himself pondering the question long after the physical wounds had begun to heal. The man's unnerving calmness in the face of horrors that had shattered Ba Quan's own composure, his inexplicable skills in the jungle and the ravine, the chilling certainty with which he dispatched the hanging apparition in the temple, it all pointed to something far beyond ordinary experience. It would be years later, after the war, after reconnecting in the relative peace of southern Vietnam, that Ba Quan would piece together the fragments of his friend's story, revealing the crushing weight of sorrow and the arcane knowledge that shaped the man now known as Master No. His given name was Lai Tu Tuc. He was born not into the hardships Ba Quan knew, but into relative privilege, the son of a prosperous merchant family in a region of China known for its bustling trade routes. Yet, a shadow hung over his beginnings. His mother, though married into wealth, had been an orphan, the sole survivor of her own family line, carrying a legacy of loss that perhaps marked her son from birth. It was whispered she faced prejudice within her husband's clan, seen as bringing an unlucky Han, spirit or fate, into their prosperous lineage. Whether because of this perceived ill omen, or due to some innate quality recognized only by discerning eyes, young Tuc's fate took an unexpected turn. One day, a wandering Taoist master, an old man with flowing silver hair clad in faded yellow robes, possessing eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of centuries, arrived at the merchant's house. Ignoring the customary pleasantries, the old master observed the children of the household before pointing directly at young Tuc. "This one," the master declared, his voice carrying quiet authority. "He has fearless eyes. The spirits do not trouble him easily. He has the root. I will take him." And so, barely more than a boy, Lai Tu Tuc was taken from his family, leaving behind the world of commerce for the secluded peaks and hidden monasteries of a remote mountain range. There, under the tutelage of the enigmatic master, his education began. It wasn't merely reading and writing, it was an immersion into the ancient arts, disciplines that blurred the lines between philosophy, magic, and spiritual warfare. He learned to read the flow of qi, the vital energy coursing through the land and living beings. He studied the intricate art of talismans, fu, learning to draw potent symbols that could ward off evil, summon spirits, or channel elemental forces. He delved into methods of divination, scrying, and understanding the whispers of fate. His training included rigorous physical and mental disciplines, meditation techniques to hone his focus and perception, and the secret methods of soul summoning and spirit placation. He learned the properties of herbs, minerals, and animal parts used in both healing and cursing. He learned to navigate not just the physical forest, but the liminal spaces between worlds. Years passed in this isolated study, shaping him into someone acutely aware of the unseen energies that governed existence, someone who understood the delicate balance between life and death, order and chaos. His master spoke occasionally of Tuc's destiny, something about fulfilling a broken lineage, about needing strength to face a predetermined family catastrophe. Tuc, immersed in his studies, paid little heed to these cryptic pronouncements then. The summons came abruptly. His master, with a heavy sigh, informed him his training was complete, but that a dark astrological alignment threatened his family. Fate cannot be avoided entirely, the master had said, sadness clouding his ancient eyes. But perhaps your presence can mitigate the worst. Go down the mountain, lie to Tuc. See your family. It may be, for the last time. Filled with a mixture of excitement and unease, Tuc descended from the serene mountains back into the tumultuous world below. He returned eager to see his parents and siblings after years of separation, but the China he returned to was unrecognizable. The air crackled with revolutionary fervor and paranoia. The Cultural Revolution was raging. Red Guards roamed the streets, denouncing perceived enemies of the state. Tradition was condemned, wealth was a crime. He arrived in his home province to find chaos. His family, marked by their merchant background, had been targeted. He reached his family home only to find it ransacked, empty. Frantic inquiries led him to the town square just in time to witness the horrifying culmination of a public struggle session. His father, accused of being a capitalist exploiter, was executed on the spot, a single gunshot echoing in the charged air. His mother and siblings, denounced as counter-revolutionaries, were dragged away by a frenzied mob, stoned to death by the very neighbors who had once shared tea with them. Tuc arrived at the execution ground later, finding only their mutilated corpses hanging as a grim warning at the village entrance. The devastation was absolute. Heartbroken, spirit shattered, he turned back towards the mountains, seeking the solace of his master, only to find the monastery abandoned, his master gone, whether dead or simply vanished, Tuc never knew. He was utterly alone, adrift in a world consumed by madness. For months, perhaps years, he wandered, a ghost haunting the fringes of a society tearing itself apart. Eventually, driven by sheer survival instinct, he joined a stream of refugees heading south, enduring hardship and danger, crossing borders under the cover of darkness, finally reaching the relative safety of Saigon and melting into the bustling, sprawling Hoa community of Cholan. With the help of distant clan connections, he established a small, unassuming business, a coffin shop. It seemed a fitting trade for a man whose life had become so intimately acquainted with death. He offered traditional funeral supplies, but also his unique skills in embalming, in preparing the dead for their final journey with a quiet dignity his own family had been brutally denied. He lived frugally, kept to himself, his youthful features hardening into the stoic mask Ba Quan would later encounter. The trauma, the profound loss, was buried deep, manifesting not as outward grief, but as an unnerving calmness, an almost detached acceptance of mortality. This was the man Ba Quan met in the Cambodian jungle. The man who could calmly pick through the horrific debris of a landmine explosion wasn't unfeeling, he was simply familiar with such sights. The man who climbed effortlessly from a pit of corpses wasn't merely lucky, his training had given him physical discipline and an understanding of leverage beyond the norm, perhaps aided by an innate sense of energy flow. The man who faced down Khmer Rouge soldiers and terrifying apparitions with equal stoicism wasn't fearless, he had simply endured horrors that dwarfed immediate physical danger. His rescue of the mutilated Vietnamese comrades Ba Quan later witnessed wasn't just duty, it was an act steeped in the memory of his own family's desecrated remains, performed with the grim efficiency of someone who knew the importance of respecting the dead, however broken. Years later, sitting with Ba Quan under the Vong Shuya moonlight, sharing rice wine and memories, Tuc had tried to explain it. Ba Quan had asked him once, during a quiet moment amidst the lingering tensions of their haunted land, what he truly feared. Tuc had looked up at the indifferent stars, taking a long drag from his cigarette. Fear. He'd murmured, his voice quiet. I fear little for myself, Ba Quan. I became accustomed to dying long ago, watching my family torn apart, then seeing comrades fall daily in the jungle, death loses its sting. What I fear now. His eyes seemed to look inward, towards those unbearable memories. What I fear is helplessness. Watching suffering I cannot prevent. And perhaps I fear when others finally understand how accustomed I am to death's presence. It wasn't callousness, Ba Quan finally understood, but a profound, soul-deep weariness, an intimacy with sorrow that set Lai Tu apart from ordinary men. It made his quiet acts of intervention, his willingness to engage with the turbulent spirit world on behalf of Ba Quan's family, seem less like sorcery and more like the weary obligation of a man forever walking the boundary between worlds, forever negotiating with the shadows born of violence and loss. His life was a testament to survival, but also to the weight of the past, a weight Ba Quan increasingly understood as he watched Master No move through the world. The sorcerer's profound intimacy with sorrow explained his unnerving calm, but it also raised unsettling questions about the nature of consequence. Violence, loss, vengeful spirits, were these forces that, once unleashed, continued to ripple outwards, demanding a balance. Sitting under the Vong Shuyan moon one humid evening, the air thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and distant incense from their regular offerings, Ba Quan found himself sharing a hushed conversation with Master No about such things, about the ghosts of war, not just the spectral kind, but the ghosts of deeds done, debts incurred in blood that might linger long after the fighting stopped. Which inevitably brought to mind the cautionary, chilling tale of Commander Locke. Locke hadn't been just a soldier, he'd been a force of nature during the chaotic years of revolution and conflict that preceded the uneasy peace. A local leader, utterly devoted to the cause, possessed of a terrifying zealotry. Ba Quan remembered him, a man whose eyes burned with conviction, who saw the world in stark black and white, loyal patriots and treacherous enemies. Master No knew of him too, perhaps even encountered his work. Locke was ruthlessly effective, purging suspected collaborators and informants with brutal efficiency. He issued firearms, famously declaring them stupid tools for cowards. A bayonet, or better yet, a sharp knife, Locke was known to say, that requires conviction. That shows wisdom. How many heads had fallen to Locke's wisdom? How many families were shattered by his unwavering, brutal interpretation of revolutionary justice? Scores, perhaps hundreds. In the chaos of the time, such actions were often lauded, necessary evils in the fight for a new future. Locke himself never doubted the righteousness of his path. But peace, when it finally settled, brought a different kind of reckoning. After the victory rallies and the establishment of new order, a strange and terrible series of misfortunes began to plague Commander Locke's family. It started with Locke himself. A man who had survived countless ambushes and firefights met his end not in battle, but during a sudden, violent thunderstorm. He was found drowned, inexplicably, headfirst in a large earthenware water jar in his own courtyard. A bizarre, almost mocking end for such a fearsome figure. Tongues wagged. Was it simple misfortune, or something more? The answer seemed to unfold with horrifying certainty in the years that followed. Locke had left behind 3 healthy children. The eldest son, once robust and outgoing, descended into rambling madness, wandering off into the dense jungle one day, never to be seen again. The second son died tragically, pulled under by a sudden current while swimming in the very river where some whispered Locke had disposed of his victims. Locke's wife, worn down by grief and fear, died giving birth to their 3rd child, a daughter they named Lean, Lotus Blossom, a fragile flower born amidst ruin. Lean grew up an orphan, raised by her frail, heartbroken grandmother in the decaying house that seemed saturated with misfortune. The vibrant prosperity Locke had enjoyed vanished as family assets were drained, paying for failed cures for the eldest son's madness or searching for his lost body. The community, once respectful or fearful of Commander Locke, now largely shunned his remaining family. Whispers of a Engip Chuang, a heavy karmic debt, a blood curse, followed Lean like a shadow. Villagers crossed themselves when she passed, pulling their own children away, afraid the Locke family's bad fortune was somehow contagious. It was a lonely childhood, marked by averted gazes and hushed warnings. Her only solace, her only true friend, was In. Perhaps because In himself carried a certain sensitivity to the unseen, or maybe just due to the simple, unjudging loyalty of childhood, he saw past the rumors and the fear that clung to Lean. He saw a bright, resilient girl with eyes that held a surprising depth despite her family's sorrow. Ba Quan remembered watching them play together as children under the shade of the great banyan tree on their property, and quiet and observant, Lean, more outgoing despite her isolation, fiercely protective of her only friend, chasing away other children who dared to taunt her about her cursed family. And would share his mother's snacks with her, listen patiently to her stories, seemingly immune to the dark cloud the rest of the village perceived. Their bond was deep, forged in shared childhood secrets and mutual acceptance. Mi Lin, ever the hopeful romantic despite her spiritual fears, adored Lean. "She has a good heart, that one," Mi Lin would often say to Ba Quan, watching the children play. "Mark my words, Quan, she'll be our daughter-in-law someday." Ba Quan would just grunt noncommittally, though he too felt a certain fondness for the resilient girl. It was during one such visit, when Lean was perhaps 10 or 11, that Master No delivered his chilling prophecy. He had come to consult with Ba Quan about strengthening the wards on the land, and happened to see An and Lean playing near the banyan tree, laughing as they chased butterflies. Master No stopped abruptly, his usual impassive face tightening, his bright eyes fixed on Lean with an intensity that made Ba Quan's breath catch. Without a word, the sorcerer knelt, picked up 2 dry twigs, snapped them precisely in half, and arranged them on the ground. He then lit them with a match, watching the tiny flames consume the wood. As the twigs smoldered into ash, he used a finger to draw swift, complex symbols in the gray powder, his lips moving silently. He stared at the symbols for a long moment, then looked up, his gaze meeting Ba Quan's across the yard. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "That girl," he murmured, his eyes flicking towards the oblivious Lean, "the lotus blossom born from blood debt, her thread is short. She carries her grandfather's karma. She will not see her 17th year." Ba Quan felt a jolt, colder than any fear he'd felt since the war. He glanced at Master No's face, impassive again, but the conviction in his eyes was undeniable. This wasn't superstition. This was the pronouncement of a man who saw the intricate, often cruel, patterns of fate. And, thankfully, hadn't heard, still engrossed in play. Ba Quan said nothing to Mi Lin, burying the dreadful prediction deep within his own heart, another heavy secret to carry. Life, for a time, seemed determined to prove the sorcerer wrong. Lean grew from a lonely child into a strikingly beautiful young woman. The shadow of her family's past seemed to recede, overshadowed by her intelligence, her quiet grace, and her blossoming beauty. She excelled in her studies, her laughter now less frequent but still capable of lighting up her expressive eyes. Boys in the village, who once shunned her, now vied for her attention, clumsy in their admiration. But Lean remained devoted only to An. Their childhood friendship deepened into the quiet, unspoken understanding of first love. They walked home from school together, shared dreams under the Vong Shuya moon, their bond a silent rebuke to the lingering whispers of the curse. Everyone assumed they would marry. Ba Quan and Mi Lin watched them, hoping Mi Lin's light-hearted prediction would overcome Master No's grim one. And, deeply smitten, saw only Lean, the bright center of his world. But fate, as Master No understood all too well, rarely forgot its appointments. As Lean approached her 16th birthday, vibrant and full of life, the memory of the sorcerer's words lay heavy and dormant in Ba Quan's heart, a chilling premonition waiting for its time to awaken. The blood debt, it seemed, had only been deferred, not cancelled. The blood debt, Ba Quan knew, was not merely a village superstition. It was a tangible force, an echo of violence that could linger, poisoning generations. As Lean approached her 16th birthday, the year Master No had chillingly predicted would be her last, an unsettling quiet fell over the Locke household, a stark contrast to the vibrant beauty of the young woman herself. And, his heart entirely hers, felt the change acutely. The easy laughter between them grew strained, overshadowed by a fear Lean couldn't articulate and couldn't comprehend. On the morning of her birthday, An took the small, intricately carved wooden bird he'd spent weeks perfecting, a simple gift, but one made with all the devotion of his young heart, and went to her house. He found the gate barred. Knocking brought Lean's grandmother to the door, her face a mask of frantic terror. "Go away, An. Go away," she'd shrieked, her voice thin and reedy. You can't see her. It's starting. Before Anne could protest, he heard it, a muffled scream from within the house, filled with pure, unadulterated horror. The door slammed shut, leaving Anne standing outside, the small wooden bird clutched uselessly in his hand, a cold dread replacing his birthday cheer. Lean disappeared from school. Whispers turned into fearful pronouncements. The lock curse was awakening. She was going mad, like her uncles before her. She was being claimed by the spirits her grandfather had wronged. And endured the gossip, his worry for Lean growing into a gnawing anxiety. He tried visiting again, several times, only to be turned away by the increasingly distraught grandmother, who refused to even speak to him through the locked door. Nights became sleepless for Anne, filled with images of Lean's terrified face, the echo of her scream haunting his thoughts. He couldn't stand by. He had to know what was happening. One moonless night, fueled by desperation and love, Anne scaled the familiar tamarind tree beside the decaying lock house, its branches offering silent passage to the upper floor window of Lean's room. The house itself felt different, colder, heavier, the air thick with an almost palpable malevolence. He slipped through the unlocked window into Lean's room. It was dark, the only light a sliver of ambient gloom from outside. He found her huddled in a corner, trembling uncontrollably, her eyes wide with terror, staring at the window. "Lean," he whispered, approaching cautiously. "It's me, Anne. What's wrong? Talk to me." It took time for her to recognize him, her mind seemingly gripped by fear. When she finally spoke, her voice was a ragged whisper, broken by terrified sobs. "He comes, every night," she choked out. "At the window, watching." And looked at the empty window, confused. "Who, Lean? Who comes?" Her breath hitched. "The soldier, Ma Cut Dao, the headless ghost." She described it in fragmented, horrifying detail, the old-style military uniform, stained and decaying, from the puppet regime era, the figure floating outside her window, solid yet ethereal, the horrifying emptiness where its head should be. "Grandmother says, it's him. Grandfather's victims, come for me. She locked me in, says it's the curse, my time." Anne's blood ran cold. He didn't understand the ghostly specifics, but he saw the raw terror in Lean's eyes, the despair that was consuming her. He couldn't leave her here, locked away, waiting for a specter. "No," he said firmly, pulling her gently to her feet. "You're not cursed. You're terrified. I'm getting you out of here. Come with me. Now." He managed to jimmy the simple lock on her door and, half carrying the trembling Lean, they crept through the silent, oppressive house and out into the night, running hand in hand towards the sanctuary of Anne's home. Ba Quan and Mi Lin welcomed Lean with worried questions, ushering her inside, trying to soothe her obvious distress. They offered comfort, food, a safe place to rest. But the safety was illusory. The entity, or the curse it represented, had followed. The disturbances began subtly, then escalated with terrifying speed. The family dog, usually placid, began whining incessantly at night, barking furiously at empty corners, its fur bristling. One morning, Anne found it dead by the gate, its body unnaturally contorted, flecks of black foam around its muzzle, its eyes wide with a terror that lingered even in death. A few days later, Ba Quan's prized collection of songbirds, kept in cages on the veranda, were all found dead simultaneously, their necks strangely broken, not a feather out of place. Then came the noises. Soft at first, weeping sounds from unoccupied rooms, the scrape of furniture being dragged across the floor above when everyone was downstairs. Then louder, heavy, rhythmic footsteps like marching boots echoing on the wooden veranda late at night, violent banging on the corrugated iron roof as if struck by massive fists, rattling the entire house. Sleep became impossible, the nights filled with a growing sense of dread. The culmination came one evening when Mi Lin, braver than she perhaps should have been, went to investigate a particularly loud crashing sound from the courtyard. The moon was full, bathing the yard in silvery light. As she stepped outside, she saw it, Standing near the banyan tree, bathed in moonlight, was the figure Lean had described, the soldier in the tattered uniform, headless, radiating an aura of profound cold and menace. Mi-Lin froze, paralyzed by terror, unable to scream, unable to move, as the figure slowly turned its empty collar towards her. She remembered nothing after that, only Ba Quan finding her collapsed on the threshold, incoherent with fear. Lean witnessed the escalating terror, saw the fear in Mi-Lin's eyes, the worry lines deepening on Ba Quan's face, the exhaustion haunting him. The weight of guilt became unbearable. She had brought this upon them. Her curse, her tainted bloodline, was destroying the only family that had ever shown her kindness, endangering the boys she loved. Despair consumed her. During a particularly violent thunderstorm a few nights later, as phantom noises raged around the house and the wind howled like a banshee, Lean slipped out unnoticed. Drawn by an irresistible despair, she ran towards the Hongtu River, now swollen and turbulent from the rains. And, sensing her absence almost immediately, felt a surge of panic. Knowing her fragile state, guessing her intent, he raced after her through the blinding rain. He reached the riverbank just as Lean threw herself into the churning, muddy water. Without hesitation, and plunged in after her, fighting the strong current, his only thought to reach her. He grabbed her arm, pulling her sputtering and resisting towards the bank. The storm raged around them, lightning illuminating the desperate struggle. Finally, dragging her onto the muddy bank, soaked and shivering, and held her close. "Lean. Why?" he cried, his voice hoarse with fear and exertion. She collapsed against him, sobbing uncontrollably. "It's me. I bring death, let me go, and let me die." He held her tighter. "No. I won't lose you, Lean. Never." And in that moment, amidst the storm, the fear, and the crushing despair, fueled by adrenaline and a love that defied curses, and kissed her. It wasn't gentle or romantic, but a desperate, fierce claiming, a raw affirmation of life against the encroaching darkness. They clung together, shivering in the relentless rain. Slowly, Lean's sobbing subsided, replaced by exhaustion, and helped her back towards the house, supporting her trembling frame. But as they reached the door, Lean gasped, her eyes rolling back, and collapsed into his arms. She was burning with a sudden, raging fever. Inside, as Mi-Lin frantically tended to the unconscious girl, stripping off her wet clothes, she let out a horrified cry. Appearing rapidly on Lean's back and arms, spreading like ink on wet paper, were dark, sinister marks, resembling the vicious welts of a whip, black and angry against her feverish skin. The curse hadn't just haunted her mind, it was now physically consuming her, pulling her towards the fate Master No had foreseen, leaving her family helpless witnesses to her terrifying decline. The sterile white walls of the provincial hospital offered no comfort, only amplified the family's helplessness. Lean lay frighteningly still, adrift in a raging fever, her breathing shallow, the ugly black marks stark against her pale skin like brands seared into her soul. Doctors conferred in hushed tones, their faces grim. They spoke of unknown infections, severe allergic reactions, inexplicable systemic shock. Tests came back inconclusive. Treatments failed. Mi-Lin wept silently, her prayers growing desperate. Ba Quan watched his son sit vigil by Lean's bedside, holding her unresponsive hand, his young face etched with a grief and fear that mirrored Ba Quan's own. The curse. Master No's prophecy. It was all coming true in the most horrific way imaginable. With shaking hands, Ba Quan sought out Master No once more, his voice cracking as he described Lean's rapid decline over the phone. Master No arrived within hours, his presence cutting through the hospital's antiseptic air like a focused beam of energy. He bypassed the bewildered medical staff, walking straight to Lean's bedside. Ignoring the charts and monitors, he placed his thin fingers gently on her forehead, her wrist, the pulse point at her neck. He observed the disturbing black marks, his eyes narrowing, his usual calm replaced by a focused intensity that spoke volumes. After a long silence, he looked up, his gaze meeting Ba Quan's. "Maleficium," he stated flatly, the single word confirming Ba Quan's deepest fears. This is not sickness. This is deliberate, targeted sorcery. Powerful. Deeply rooted. He glanced around the sterile room. This place, it offers no defense. We must move her. Leaving the baffled doctor's sputtering objections, they carefully transported the barely conscious Lin, not back to her grandmother's haunted house, but to a small, ancient temple nestled deep in the Vong Shuyan Hills, a place Master No knew well, dedicated to a fierce protector deity whose stone visage guarded the entrance. Inside, the air was cool, thick with the scent of aged sandalwood and decades of burnt incense. It felt like a sanctuary, a pocket of stillness against the encroaching darkness. Master No laid Lin gently on a mat before the main altar. His first actions were aimed at stabilization. With unnerving precision, he produced slender silver needles, inserting them into specific points along Lin's limbs and torso, seeking to redirect and bolster her fading life force, her Kai. He prepared poultices from dried herbs crushed with potent-smelling liquids, applying them to her fevered skin. Lin's breathing eased slightly, the terrifying tremors lessening, but the sinister black marks remained stubbornly etched upon her, pulsing faintly like things alive. "This buys us time," Master No murmured, wiping sweat from his brow. "But it doesn't break the chain. The source of the attack remains potent." Time. How much did they have? Master No turned his attention to Lin's distraught grandmother, who had followed them to the temple. His questioning was gentle but insistent, probing into the family's history, specifically Commander Locke's past deeds and potential enemies. Had Locke ever sought supernatural aid or protection himself? Had he possessed any objects imbued with particular significance or ill fortune? The old woman, weeping, finally dredged up a painful, buried memory. Years ago, after a particularly brutal campaign, her husband, Commander Locke, had become troubled. Fearful, perhaps, of retribution, either earthly or otherwise. He had sought out a renowned sorceress in a distant province, a woman known as Madame Lamb, not, the grandmother thought, to curse his knife, but to seek a powerful blessing for it, a charm to protect him from the consequences of the blood it had shed. He returned strangely confident, the knife always kept close, but soon after, the misfortunes began. After Locke's bizarre death, the knife had vanished. She assumed it was lost or stolen amidst the chaos. Master No listened intently, his eyes darkening. A blessing sought with blood money, he mused, often twists into a curse. And the knife, a conduit, steeped in violence and now, likely, in Madame Lamb's possession. He explained the grim likelihood, Madame Lamb, perhaps holding a grudge against Locke or simply seeing an opportunity, was using the karmically charged knife as an anchor, a powerful link to channel destructive energy towards Locke's last living descendant. "She is feeding on your granddaughter's misfortune, grandmother. Growing stronger as Lin weakens." The immediate need was to deflect the attack, to give them breathing room. This required a substitute. Master No procured a large, healthy frog from the temple pond. Taking several strands of Lin's hair, he carefully wove them together with red thread onto a small piece of yellow paper inscribed with intricate, spidery characters, a talisman. Chanting intensely, his voice dropping to a low drone, he gently forced the struggling frog's mouth open and pushed the talisman deep inside. He placed the frog on a flat stone before the altar. As his chant continued, a visible tremor ran through the frog. Slowly, disturbingly, faint black lines began to appear on its moist green skin, mirroring the whip-like marks on Lin's body. The frog shuddered, its sides heaving, then grew still, the marks now starkly visible. "It takes the blow, for now," Master No said grimly, carefully scooping the marked frog into a covered basket. "But the connection remains through the knife. We must confront the source. We must face Madame Lamb." The journey to Madame Lamb's residence was a study in contrasts. Leaving the serene, ancient temple, they descended back towards the burgeoning town, arriving at a large, ostentatiously modern villa set behind high walls, guarded by stern-looking men. The sheer display of wealth felt jarring, almost vulgar, compared to the deep, hidden power Master No represented. Announcing themselves, they were eventually granted entry, ushered into a lavishly decorated receiving room. Madame Lam emerged, a large woman, draped in expensive silks and laden with heavy gold jewelry. Her face was powdered, her smile smooth, but her eyes were small, shrewd, and cold. She sat amidst an array of Buddha statues and offering tables overflowing with fruit, projecting an air of pious benevolence that felt utterly false. Master No, she greeted him, her voice like honey laced with venom. An unexpected honor. And you bring guests. Her gaze swept dismissively over Ba Quan, and in Master No dispensed with pleasantries. Madame Lam. We come regarding the knife of Commander Locke. A flicker of surprise, quickly masked, crossed her face. Commander Locke. That name brings back distant memories. A troubled man. And his knife? I recall no knife. Do not insult my intelligence, Lam. Master No's voice was quiet but held an edge of steel. The knife, blessed by you, steeped in his violent karma, which you now use to drain the life from his granddaughter. Madame Lam laughed, a sharp, unpleasant sound. My dear Master No, your imagination runs wild. Perhaps too much time spent communing with spirits has addled your senses. I deal in blessings, fortune, appeasing ancestors. Curses. Such crude negativity is beneath me. Is the Shadow Weaver talisman also beneath you? Master No asked softly. The effect was immediate. Madame Lam's eyes widened fractionally, a hint of genuine fear entering them before being replaced by cold fury. The name hung in the air, the name of a forbidden, parasitic magic whispered about only in the darkest circles. A magic that functioned exactly as Master No had described, latching onto a karmic debt, an object soaked in negative energy like Locke's knife, and siphoning the fortune, luck, and very life force from the original owner's bloodline to funnel it directly to the talisman's wielder. It explained Lam's immense wealth, her seemingly effortless rise from obscurity. She was feeding off Lean's life. How dare you, she shrieked, her composure shattering. Get out. Guards. Throw these fools out. Two burly men with intricate tattoos covering their arms moved forward menacingly. But Master No, despite his age and slight frame, moved with blurring speed. A precise strike to a nerve cluster sent one guard collapsing. A swift, redirected block and a sharp palm heel strike sent the other staggering back, gasping. It was over in seconds. Master No turned back to the enraged sorceress, his eyes blazing now with cold fire. The frog buys her time, Lam. But it will not last. Release the girl. Destroy the talisman and return the knife. This is your only warning. He turned, gesturing for Ba Quan and to follow. You will regret this, old man. Madame Lam screamed after them, her face contorted with hatred. You cannot stop me. As they left the opulent villa, the air outside felt cleaner, but the confrontation left Ba Quan shaken. They faced an enemy rich, powerful, and utterly ruthless, armed with magic designed to drain the very life from its victims. And the temporary shield Master No had erected, the poor frog now bearing Lean's marks, felt terrifyingly fragile. Time was running out, faster than ever. The confrontation with Madame Lam left Ba Quan and deeply shaken, but Master No allowed them no time for contemplation. The temporary shield provided by the frog ritual was failing, its fragile magic rapidly consumed by the relentless assault channeled through Commander Locke's cursed knife. Back at the temple, Lean's condition deteriorated sharply. The black marks spread like spiderwebs across her skin, her fever spiked dangerously, and her breathing grew shallow, rattling in her chest. Master No's face was grim, etched with a weariness that went beyond physical fatigue. The Shadow Weaver talisman, anchored by the knife's blood debt, is too strong, he explained to Ba Quan and Mi Lin, his voice heavy. The substitution merely delayed the inevitable. Madame Lam's avarice fuels it, draining Lean's life force to enrich her own fortune. There is only one path left. but it is fraught with peril beyond imagining. He turned his piercing gaze towards An, who hadn't left Lean's side. And Master No said softly, yet with an intensity that commanded absolute attention. Your connection to the spirit world, the sensitivity that made you vulnerable, is also our only hope. To save Lean, you must undertake a journey. A journey into the Koi Am, the spirit realm, the land of the dead and the restless. Mi Lin gasped, clutching Ba Quan's arm. The spirit realm? It was madness. Ba Quan stared at the sorcerer, his mind reeling. Master No, he's just a boy. How can he possibly? He is the only one who can, Master No interrupted firmly. His spirit is already known there, marked by his previous encounter. And his love for the girl, that provides a tether, a motivation strong enough, perhaps, to navigate the dangers. He explained the objective, and spirit must travel to a specific nexus point within the spectral plane, the great house where certain powerful artifacts were kept, and retrieve one, a perpetually glowing lotus flower held within a 5-colored lantern. This lotus held the concentrated essence of life and purity, potent enough to counteract the death-dealing magic of the talisman. The risks, Master No stressed, were immense. An's soul could become lost, ensnared by illusions, devoured by malevolent entities, or simply fail to return before his physical body expired. There were strict rules. He must not speak to any spirit he encountered, no matter how familiar they seemed. He must not eat or drink anything offered, no matter how tempting. He must remain focused solely on his quest. And he had limited time, the duration Master No could maintain the perilous connection, symbolized by the life of a specially prepared lantern and would carry. Ba Quan felt torn, horrified by the prospect, yet seeing the life ebb from Lean before his eyes. Mi Lin wept, praying fervently. But it was An, looking from Lean's pale face to Master No's grave expression, who made the decision. I'll do it, he said, his voice quiet but firm, filled with a resolve beyond his years. For Lean. Tell me what I must do. The final ritual began under the cold light of a waning moon, near the Tet holiday. An altar, more elaborate than before, was erected in the temple courtyard, adorned with colorful flags bearing intricate symbols Master No painted himself. Master No donned formal yellow Taoist robes embroidered with protective trigrams and the image of a powerful, 9-tailed fox across the back. In his hand, he held a heavy bronze disc etched with concentric circles of characters Ba Quan couldn't decipher. The air grew thick with potent incense and unspoken tension. A pig was brought for sacrifice, intended to power the ritual, to open the gateway. But as Master No raised his ceremonial knife, something went wrong. The blade refused to cut, skittering off the pig's hide as if hitting stone. A collective gasp went through the small group. A terrible omen. The spirits, or the forces governing the passage, rejected the offering. Master No's face tightened. This required a greater price. Without hesitation, he sliced his own palm with the knife, letting his blood drip into a bowl. Then, turning to An, he gently took the boy's hand and made a similar small cut, mingling their blood. He soaked a yellow paper talisman in the mixture, set it alight, and mixed the ashes with water. Drink, he commanded him. An obeyed without flinching. Master No then smeared a trace of the blood mixture onto An's forehead, chanting rapidly. Now the pig's sacrifice proceeded without issue. Its severed head was placed upon the bronze disc. Blood dripped onto the arcane symbols, and unervingly, the pig's head began to smolder, then burn with a smokeless, internal fire. The gate is open, Master No declared, his voice taking on a strange, rasping quality. His eyes seemed to glow with an inner light, his features sharpening, becoming almost feral. Fox-like. He began to chant louder, a primal sound that seemed to shake the very air. Birds startled from nearby trees, dogs in the distant village howled once then fell silent, hiding. And, stripped to the waist, sat cross-legged on a mat before the altar as instructed. Master No placed a hand, now radiating palpable heat, flat against An's bare back. and cried out as the world dissolved. Vertigo seized him, darkness spinning, pressing in, accompanied by an agonizing pressure in his head. Then, silence and cold. He found himself standing in a distorted, monochrome version of his own village street. Everything was gray, washed out, silent, yet vibrating with unseen energy. The only points of color were the flickering flames of a small, simple paper lantern he now held in his hand, and far in the distance, a multi-hued glow marking the great house. "Remember the rules," Master No's voice echoed directly in his mind, faint but clear. "Do not speak. Do not eat. Do not drink. Resist all temptation. Find the house. Retrieve the lotus. Find lean spirit. Return before the lantern dies. Go. Quickly." Clutching the lantern, whose flame pulsed like a fragile heartbeat, and moved forward. The street wasn't empty. Spectral figures drifted through the gray landscape. Soldiers in torn uniforms reenacted a silent, ghostly battle near the edge of his family's land, firing phantom rifles, falling without sound. He recognized faces among the dead: old Mr. Hai Lin who'd died of a heart attack, Aunt Bei who'd slipped and fallen, now just gray shades wandering aimlessly. He hurried past, averting his gaze, nausea churning in his stomach. Then, figures materialized directly in his path, victims of traffic accidents, their spectral forms bearing horrific injuries. One, a patrolman and vaguely remembered, a notorious drunkard killed hitting a cow, waved eagerly. "An. Boy. Don't you remember me? Have a drink. Ease your journey." He held out a spectral cup. And shook his head violently, remembering the warning, and pushed past, the patrolman's mournful cry following him. He finally reached the great house. It was immense, its architecture alien yet somehow familiar, piercing the gray sky. Dark red walls, black tiled roofs soaring into nothingness. Fierce statues of spirit guardians flanked the massive gates, radiating palpable power. And hesitated, then held up the blood-written talisman Master No had pressed into his hand before the ritual began. One of the guardians looked down, its stone eyes seeming to scan the talisman, then slowly, ponderously, nodded, gesturing him inside. The heavy gates creaked open, revealing darkness within. Trembling, and stepped through. Bang! The gates slammed shut behind him. He raised his lantern. Its light revealed a vast chamber bathed in a sickly red glow. A long table stretched before him, laden with every imaginable delicacy: roasted meats, exotic fruits, steaming dumplings, fragrant soups. The aroma alone was intoxicating, making his empty stomach clench with hunger. He hadn't eaten properly in days. Just one bite. But Master No's voice echoed, "Do not eat." Gritting his teeth, and forced himself onward, through an archway at the far end. The next chamber blazed with a harsh yellow light. The heat was intense, scorching, drying his throat instantly. On tables here were pitchers filled with cool water, fragrant tea, potent rice wine, sparkling fruit juices. His thirst was agonizing. Just a sip. Do not drink. Sweat pouring down his face, and stumbled through, his throat raw. The third chamber shimmered with a soft, rosy pink light. Mist swirled around a large, sunken pool in the center, the water steaming invitingly. And standing beside the pool, smiling tenderly at him, was Lean. Not the empty-eyed spirit he sought, but the vibrant, beautiful Lean he loved, wrapped loosely in a silk towel, her hair unbound, her eyes full of warmth and invitation. And her voice, achingly familiar, echoed in the misty air. "You look so tired, my love. So worn. Come, bathe with me. Rest here. Why rush?" She held out her hand. And felt his resolve wavering, his heart aching with longing. This was all he wanted. But then, an image flashed in his mind, the real Lean, lying pale and still, the black marks crawling across her skin. This wasn't her. This was a trap. "Do not speak. He turned away from the apparition, ignoring its heartbroken cry, and forced himself towards the next door, clutching the lantern tighter. The door opened onto a steep flight of stairs leading upwards into darkness. At the very top, suspended in the air, glowed the five-colored lantern, and nestled within its heart, pulsing with soft, pure light, was the ethereal lotus blossom. He raced up the stairs, reached out, and plucked the luminous flower. It felt cool and vibrant in his hand. He turned to descend, relief washing over him, only to realize the guiding lantern he carried was flickering violently, its flame shrinking, threatening to die. Time was running out. Fast. Where was Lean's spirit? He burst out of the great house, scanning the desolate gray landscape. Her house. School. Their meeting places. He ran frantically, the lantern flame dwindling to a spark. Despair clawed at him. Then, he remembered, their childhood tree, the ancient banyan back near his family's land. He raced towards it, praying he wasn't too late. She was there. Sitting at the base of the massive trunk, staring blankly ahead, her spirit form gray and indistinct, surrounded by other vague, sorrowful shapes. The lantern in his hand gave one final flicker, then died. Utter darkness crashed down, accompanied by a chorus of terrifying sounds, wails, shrieks, hungry moans. Formless shadows, cold and grasping, surged towards and Lean's spirit from all sides. And threw himself protectively in front of Lean, holding the lotus aloft, bracing for the end. Just as the shadows were about to engulf them, a searing white light erupted. A hand, blazing with golden fire, reached through the darkness, grabbing En's arm. Master No's voice, amplified, filled with power, roared a single, commanding syllable that blasted the shadows back. The world spun again, a vortex of light and sound, and then, nothing. And knew no more. And returned to consciousness slowly, adrift in a sea of disorientation. The chilling darkness of the spirit realm dissolved, replaced by the warm, familiar scent of sandalwood and aged timber. He blinked, his vision swimming, focusing first on the intricately carved temple ceiling above him. Was it real? Had the terrifying journey actually happened? Then, he turned his head. Lean was sitting beside his mat, watching him, her eyes clear, her face no longer pale and gaunt but filled with color, vibrant with life. The horrifying black marks that had crawled across her skin were gone, vanished as if they had never been. A tentative, radiant smile touched her lips as their eyes met. She whispered, her voice clear, strong. Relief, profound and overwhelming, crashed over him, washing away the lingering horrors of the coy AM. Tears streamed down his face as he reached for her hand, gripping it tightly, needing the solid, warm reality of her presence. Lean, you're okay. I am now, she murmured, her own tears falling freely. The door burst open and Lin rushed in, followed closely by Ba Quan and Lean's grandmother, their faces etched with days of sleepless anxiety. Seeing Lean awake, smiling, vibrant, Lin let out a choked sob, rushing forward to embrace the girl. Ba Quan stood frozen for a moment, his usual stoicism crumbling as he took in the scene, the undeniable miracle before him. Lean's grandmother fell to her knees, hands clasped, murmuring prayers of frantic gratitude to the temple deities and, perhaps, to the quiet man standing near the altar. Master No observed the emotional reunion, his face weary but serene. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips as he looked at him, then at the restored Lean. Very good, he said softly, the two words carrying the weight of a successfully concluded cosmic battle. Lean's recovery was swift and complete. The fever vanished, her strength returned, the haunted look replaced by her usual bright intelligence, though perhaps now tempered with a newfound depth, a shadow of knowledge in her eyes hinting at the ordeal her spirit had endured. Whether she retained clear memories of the curse or En's journey remained unspoken between them, a shared understanding passing in glances rather than words. The family returned to their home in Vong Shuyan, the atmosphere palpably lighter, though the memory of the terror, the brush with destructive sorcery, lingered like a faint scar on their collective psyche. They diligently performed the monthly offerings to the spirits of the land, as Ba Quan had promised during the seance, offerings made now not just out of fear, but with a measure of understanding and respect for the unseen forces they shared the land with. The strange noises ceased, the oppressive weight lifted, and the semblance of true peace finally settled over the house built on haunted ground. Time flowed onward. Anne and Lean, their bond forged in childhood friendship and tempered in the crucible of supernatural terror, found their love deepening into an unshakable certainty. In the shade of the great banyan tree, once a place of horror, they now spoke of futures, their shared experience a silent foundation beneath their dreams. Eventually, under the watchful eyes of their relieved families, they married in a simple ceremony, a celebration not just of their union, but of life's resilience, of love's triumph over darkness. Their laughter echoed where spectral cries once lingered, a testament to the peace hard won. It was perhaps a year or two after their wedding, during a season of placid prosperity, that the news reached Ba Quan. A traveler passing through from the region near Hoc Mon, where Master No resided, brought word. The sorcerer, Lai Tu Tuc, was dead. The circumstances were strange, unsettling. He hadn't been ill. He hadn't suffered an accident. He had simply been found one morning in his modest dwelling, lifeless, his body strangely broken. Shattered from within, some whispered, though there were no external marks, no signs of struggle. Healthy and seemingly vigorous one day, gone the next. Ba Quan received the news with a profound shock that quickly settled into a deep, aching sorrow. Master No, his friend, his savior, the enigmatic figure who had walked with him through the hell of war and the shadows of the spirit world. Dead. And the manner of it, broken. Instantly, Ba Quan's mind flashed back to the desperate ritual in the temple courtyard, the pig's sacrifice failing, the knife refusing to cut, the vital need for blood magic to open the gate. Master No cutting his own hand, then Anne's, then proceeding. Had the price for that passage, for wielding the power necessary to snatch Lean back from the abyss, been higher than they knew? Had the sorcerer, when the initial sacrifice was rejected, offered himself as the conduit, the payment? Had his own life force been the ultimate fuel for the rescue, his body finally succumbing to the catastrophic strain months later? Ba Quan would never know for certain. Master No, Lai Tu Tuc, took his secrets with him, leaving behind only the memory of his quiet power, his profound sorrow, and the immeasurable weight of his final sacrifice. Ba Quan mourned his friend, forever indebted, forever humbled by the mysteries the sorcerer represented. The ripples of that climactic confrontation spread further. News eventually trickled back to Vong Shuyan about Madame Lam. Her downfall wasn't immediate, but it was inexorable. Perhaps Master No's death removed a check on her power, or perhaps the turning of the karmic wheel simply gathered momentum. Her lucrative businesses began to fail, investments soured inexplicably, crops withered, clients mysteriously disappeared. Her ill-gotten wealth evaporated like morning mist. Then came personal tragedy. Her beloved daughter, the apparent heir to her fortune, fell victim to a sudden, wasting illness that baffled physicians, mirroring in a cruel twist the very affliction Lam had inflicted upon Lean. Desperate, consumed by paranoia and fear, Madame Lam frantically sought out Master No, hoping his power could reverse her misfortunes, perhaps even break the curse she herself had wielded. But her search was futile. She arrived in Hoc Mon only to learn the sorcerer was dead, beyond her reach. Faced with the utter ruin of her life, stripped of her wealth, power, and family, confronting the undeniable weight of her own dark karma, Madame Lam finally broke. She abandoned her opulent villa, gave away her remaining possessions, and retreated into the anonymity of a remote Buddhist nunnery, seeking not power, but repentance, dedicating her remaining years to prayer and austerity, forever haunted by the price of her own malevolent sorcery. And so, the main conflicts found their resolution. Lean and Anne built their life together, forever bound by love and the shared knowledge of the darkness they had overcome. The architects of their suffering met their respective ends, Madame Lam in penitent obscurity, Master No in enigmatic sacrifice. The land in Vong Shuyan, though still holding the echoes of its bloody past, felt quieter now, the bargain struck with its spectral inhabitants seemingly holding Peace, fragile but real, had returned. Yet, the cost had been immense, measured in blood, terror, and a life willingly given. The journey through the shadows left indelible scars, constant reminders of the thin veil separating the mundane world from the vast, often terrifying, realms of the unseen, and the profound truth that every action, good or ill, eventually casts a long shadow demanding its due. The cycle closed. Peace, bought with sacrifice and sealed by repentance, settled over the family in Vongshuyan. Lean, restored and vibrant, married and, their love story a quiet testament to resilience woven against a backdrop of terror. Madame Lamb, stripped of her power and stolen fortune, retreated into the austere anonymity of a remote nunnery, her life a stark lesson in karmic retribution. And Master No, the enigmatic sorcerer Lai Tuc, rested in a silence as profound and mysterious as his life, his final act a sacrifice whispered about but never fully comprehended. The haunted land, site of battles both spectral and mortal, grew quieter, the monthly offerings a steady rhythm acknowledging the presence of the unseen, the pact made in desperation holding firm. But what legacies remain when the immediate storm passes? The chronicle of the haunted land in Vongshuyan transcends a simple ghost story. It unfolds as a complex tapestry woven with threads of belief, trauma, consequence, and the enduring mystery of what lies just beyond the edge of our known world. It serves as a powerful, unsettling reminder that the veil between the seen and unseen may be far thinner, far more permeable, than our modern sensibilities care to admit. The land itself stands as a central character, a silent witness saturated with history and sorrow. Vongshuyan, like so many places scarred by conflict, demonstrates how landscapes absorb the psychic residue of intense human experience. The violent deaths of soldiers, hastily buried without rites, their anguish and confusion clinging to the soil, the lingering trauma of battles fought and atrocities witnessed, these energies don't simply dissipate. They seep into the earth, into the trees, into the very air, creating pockets of heavy yin energy, places where the past refuses to stay buried. Was it the ghosts of individual soldiers encountered? Or was it the land itself breathing out the accumulated grief and violence, manifesting in forms shaped by local belief and personal sensitivity? The story suggests both might be true, that places can hold memory, and memory, under certain conditions, can take on a life of its own, interacting with those attuned enough, or vulnerable enough, to perceive it. Or perhaps, the sheer concentration of violent death creates something else entirely, not just individual ghosts, but a wounded sentience within the soil itself, reacting against the intrusion of life, demanding acknowledgement or appeasement before allowing peace to take root. Woven through this haunted landscape is the undeniable thread of karma, the intricate law of cause and effect. Commander Locke's brutal actions, committed under the banner of revolution, set in motion a chain reaction of suffering that echoed down through his bloodline. His violent end, followed by the madness and deaths of his children, culminated in the curse that afflicted his granddaughter, Lean. It's a stark illustration of the belief that actions, particularly those involving bloodshed and injustice, create debts that must eventually be paid. Yet, it raises questions. Does the conviction of righteousness, like Commander Locke's revolutionary zeal, mitigate the weight of bloodshed? The unfolding tragedy suggests not. The universe keeps its own grim tally, regardless of ideology. Madame Lamb's story serves as the dark inverse. Recognizing the karmic debt attached to Locke and his cursed knife, she didn't seek to alleviate it but to exploit it, using the nefarious Shadow Weaver talisman to parasitically drain the Locke family's remaining life force and fortune to fuel her own prosperity. Her eventual downfall, the loss of wealth, the death of her daughter, her final retreat into repentance, underscores the belief that such violations of cosmic balance ultimately invite their own retribution. Was it purely the impersonal turning of the karmic wheel, or did Master No, in his final confrontation, set in motion subtle countercurrents, unraveling the threads of her stolen fortune even before his death? Karma, in this narrative, is not a passive concept but an active, often harsh, force ensuring that accounts are eventually settled, one way or another. Against this backdrop of supernatural consequence plays the very human drama of war's lingering trauma. Ba Quan's journey is central here. The hardened skepticism of the young soldier who faced the tangible horrors of the Cambodian campaign is gradually eroded by experiences that defy rational explanation. His initial dismissal of Mi Lin's fears, his reluctance to engage with Master No, gives way to grudging acceptance, then desperate reliance, as the supernatural directly impacts his family, particularly his son. His flashbacks to the war, the landmine, the ravine of corpses, the ghost in the temple, aren't just backstory, they are unhealed wounds, psychic scars that perhaps make him, despite his skepticism, subconsciously receptive to the haunted energies of Vong Shuyan. His journey shows the overt scars, the jumpiness, the reluctance to believe until forced. Master No, Lai Tu Tuc, embodies an even deeper level of trauma. The annihilation of his family during the Cultural Revolution, coupled with his experiences in war and his lifelong engagement with the spirit world, shapes his stoic demeanor and his profound understanding of death. His deeper, older wounds manifested as a chilling stoicism, a functional shield built over an abyss of loss. His calmness isn't detachment, it's the stillness of someone who has faced the abyss and survived, carrying its chill within him always. The spectral soldier's Lin and Mi Lin encounter could be seen not just as literal ghosts, but as potent metaphors for the way trauma itself haunts landscapes and lives long after the events have passed. The narrative constantly probes the tension between belief and skepticism. Mi Lin represents unwavering faith, her belief in the spirit world both a source of fear and a catalyst for seeking protection. Her faith, though sometimes paralyzing her with fear, ultimately provided the language and the pathway to seek help from Master No. Ba Quan embodies the journey from disbelief to reluctant acceptance forced by undeniable experience. His pragmatism, initially a shield, proved useless against forces outside its scope. Only when forced to confront and accept the reality of the unseen could he participate in finding a solution. Belief, then, becomes not just perception, but perhaps a necessary tool for navigating a world where not everything yields to logic. Master No operates from a place beyond mere belief. For him, the spirit world and its complex rules are simply reality, forces to be navigated with knowledge, skill, and respect. Does belief create these encounters, or merely open the door to perceiving them? The story leaves this question open, suggesting that reality itself might be more fluid, more responsive to perception and intention, than rigid materialism allows. And woven throughout this darkness is the redemptive power of sacrifice and love. An's willingness to brave the horrors of the spirit realm for Lin stands as the story's emotional core, love as a force potent enough to challenge ancient curses and powerful sorcery. But the ultimate sacrifice belongs to Master No. His mysterious death, strongly implied to be the cost of the final ritual, the price paid for snatching Lin back from the clutches of Madame Lam's magic when the initial sacrifice failed, elevates him beyond a mere sorcerer. It positions him as a figure of profound compassion, perhaps even atonement, willingly exchanging his life for another's. Was his sacrifice a calculated act of exchange, a predetermined fulfillment of his own complex destiny, perhaps balancing debts incurred through his own mastery of arcane arts? Or was it a simple, profound act of compassion for the young couple caught in a storm not of their making? The mystery surrounding his broken end leaves only speculation, cementing his legacy as one of both immense power and inscrutable selflessness. His enigmatic past, filled with loss and arcane power, finds its final expression in this ultimate act, breaking the cycle of violence and retribution initiated by Commander Locke's actions decades earlier. It contrasts sharply with the selfish, parasitic power sought by Madame Lam, highlighting different paths one can take when wielding forces beyond the ordinary. In the end, the Chronicle of Vong Shuyan leaves us with lingering echoes. Peace is restored, love endures, and justice, in its own slow, inexorable way, prevails. And then Lin live on, carrying the knowledge of what they survived, perhaps forever subtly changed, maybe and sensitivity never fully receded, leaving him attuned to the whispers on the wind, while Lin occasionally feels a phantom chill, an echo of the darkness she overcame. Madame Lam faces her solitary repentance. Master No exists now only in memory, a figure of sorrowful power and ultimate sacrifice, his true history known perhaps only to Ba Quan. But the land remembers. The veil remains thin. Is the peace in Vong Shuyan permanent, or merely a pause, maintained by the fragile truce of monthly offerings? Do the spirits truly rest, or merely wait? The story serves as a meditation on the enduring power of human choices, violence begetting violence, greed consuming itself, love demanding courage, and sacrifice holding the potential for profound redemption. It reminds us that the past is never truly past, its energies lingering in places and bloodlines, and that our interactions with the world, both seen and unseen, carry consequences that ripple further than we can ever truly know. What unseen forces shape our lives? What debts do we inherit, and what legacies do we leave behind? The whispers from the haunted land offer no easy answers, only the enduring mystery that lies just beyond the veil, challenging us to consider the echoes of the past and the profound interconnectedness of all things, seen and unseen.